More bad news for one of China's largest real estate developers, Evergrande. So, for weeks now, it was predictable that Evergrande was either going to have to suspend bond payments or default on their corporate bonds. It is no secret, for the last couple weeks, Evergrande's corporate bonds have been trading at enormously deep discounts, I think for 30 cents or less on the dollar weeks ago. Well, earlier this week on Monday, they suspended bond payments. But the main risk here is actually not with Evergrande, it's with their counterparties. It's with the banks and other financial institutions and lenders that loaned Evergrande money, and now Evergrande cannot pay it back. So as you can see there on your screen, Evergrande claims to have $300 billion in liabilities, but that number is almost definitely understated. As I've talked about in the past, citing money manager Perth Toll and others, many large Chinese companies, including many state-owned enterprises in mainland China, have 2 or 3 sets of accounting books. It is extremely common in China to understate liabilities and to overstate asset values. So Evergrande is probably one of the most, if not the most, egregious examples of this. The main counterparty that's cited as having problems in China is Huarong Bank, which buys distressed debt. However, there probably is much larger Chinese banks with enormous exposure to Evergrande, either directly or indirectly through China's enormous shadow banking system. Now, there was a troll on my last Evergrande video claiming that China's credit bubble is tiny, claiming that it's only 50 trillion yuan. This is 100% incorrect. Since 2007, China's credit bubble has grown the fastest in world history. It went from barely $1 trillion or $2 trillion in credit in 2007, officially inside the mainland Chinese economy. Since 2007, the amount of credit inside China's economy has gone from barely $1 trillion or two up to $50 trillion or more. And a lot of this is bad debt that cannot be serviced. So China does have an enormous credit bubble inside mainland China. A lot of this is because of shady financing involving the local government financing vehicles, which were scams and Ponzi schemes and real estate scams set up by local governments to get loans from banks, and they cannot pay back the loans. So these are real estate development scams because one of the largest sources of income for local governments inside China is turning farmland or basically worthless land into real estate development land that can be then sold for luxury condos. So companies like Evergrande were heavily benefiting from this, and Evergrande was also involved in the pre-sale scams where they would take people's money to try to build either single-family homes or luxury condos. And in many cases over the last couple of years, Evergrande was either not building the luxury condos at all or the single-family homes at all, or not finishing them. There's also other real estate developers inside China where this is occurring, but no other real estate developer has been doing this at the scale that Evergrande has. So the big problems are not actually Evergrande, they are the counterparties that loaned Evergrande money, whether that is potentially HSBC Bank, which would not be backed by the Chinese Communist Party. So HSBC Bank would not get a bailout directly, at least, from the Chinese Communist Party. They are not a Chinese state-owned enterprise bank, or another bank or financial entity that loaned Evergrande money through the very opaque shadow banking system in China, which is absolutely enormous. There's a lot of peer-to-peer lending scams and others involved in that as well. There's also really good threads on this over the last couple days from this anonymous money manager, The Last Bear Standing. He has a number of very, very long Twitter threads. I'll attach links to those in the information and description section. There's also about 4 articles on Evergrande's problems if you want to read more about this. But the main issue here is counterparty risk to Evergrande. So which banks loaned Evergrande money? Are we ever actually going to get transparency on this? Are we ever going to find that out? Probably not. But the Chinese government officials seem more interested than American officials in letting the air out of a lot of Chinese stocks and commodity prices, as a lot of the policy decisions lately have been to allow Chinese stocks to fall. China's stock market indexes are down a lot relative to US stock market indexes, and commodity prices, especially base metals and energy, the last couple months have had a big correction. But I've been covering this in videos over the last 3 or 4 months, really since May. Chinese Communist Party officials have explicitly stated in public that they want to do all types of different draconian policies to get commodities prices lower. Because I think stagflation and shrinkflation has been a big problem in China really since the pandemic started, along with supply chain problems and shortages. Finally, if you like content like this and want to help keep content like this free so it doesn't all end up behind a paywall, or you want far more in-depth content research, financial education, and analysis than I provide in these short little free videos, there are now 29 new articles out in the last 13 or so weeks on a lot of interesting topics about global macro companies and sectors, a lot of in-depth articles on gold miners, silver miners, which ones are keeping their costs in check, which ones are actually making a lot of money despite the gold price not really doing that much in US dollars, which companies are actually increasing their dividends substantially. We've been looking for income opportunities while a lot of people complain that the gold price is not doing anything. Their mining stocks are not doing anything. The underlying businesses for some of these companies are doing very, very well. Some of them are increasing dividends substantially by 50%. So if you want to learn more about that, there are over 180 articles, charts, and audio podcasts behind the paywall exclusive for patrons, all for the cost of a Starbucks cup of coffee per month, only $5 a month. I charge less than anyone else in this space here for premium content. I think you will be very happy with the research that I provide. If you don't like it, you can always cancel, but I think you're really going to like it. So if I could wrap up this short little video very quickly, we may never know all the different counterparties that Evergrande cannot pay back. We only know one publicly for now, that is Warong Bank, the distressed asset manager financial institution company. That is the name that's going around. But my sources say there are much larger banks than that have enormous amounts of money loaned out to Evergrande and are not going to get paid back. They're going to need bailouts from the Chinese Communist Party because Evergrande is not going to be able to pay them back. And Evergrande is overstating their real estate assets. They haven't finished a lot of buildings lately. They haven't finished a lot of luxury condos and single-family homes lately. They've been collecting pre-sale, and they've been understating their liabilities, which is very, very common in China, with a lot of large Chinese companies cooking their books and having 2 or 3 sets of books. Accounting fraud is very common in China. The accounting fraud is done differently than it is here in the United States, but it is especially egregious towards foreigners, which is why it is a big red flag that a large company like BlackRock is looking to start a new $1 trillion Chinese index fund and ETF for foreign investors.